Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us from wherever you are on this Saturday. My name is Annie Jeong. I was class of 2014, and I am so pleased to be introducing this afternoon's event. I'm currently living in New York City with my husband, who is Williams 2013, and our daughter, Ellie. And I'm a head agent for my class and a former Alumni Fund vice chair, and then a member of the Davis Center Initiative Committee. And it's such a pleasure to be with you all today as we celebrate the fourth biennial Bolin Legacy Mentorship Weekend. So thank you for being a part of this really important event celebrating the legacy of mentorship of Gaius Charles Bolin, class of 1889, and the first Black graduate of Williams, and the power and voice of our communities of color. And we'd like to remind everyone that this event, as well as all Bolin events, will center on the experiences of students and alumni of color. And we ask that all attendees just be mindful and respectful of what that space is and what is shared here. And before we begin, we just want to respectfully acknowledge that this event is coming to you from Williams College, which stands on the ancestral homelands of the Stockbridge Munsee Mohicans, who are the indigenous peoples of the region, now called Williamstown. And following tremendous hardship after being forced from their valued homelands, they continued as a sovereign tribal nation in Wisconsin, which is where they reside today. So we honor and pay respect to their ancestors past and present as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. Okay, thank you. And this event will take place predominantly in breakout rooms, but given our attendance today and the fact that it's a little bit more intimate, it's great we can actually keep this all in one room. And as such, we will be recording this and it'll be made available later. But we do ask that individually you might refrain from taking photos or recording on your end. That said, we will also, after this weekend, we'll send out a post-event survey and hope that you can offer your thoughts up through that medium. And our room today will feature several members of our campus community who will provide an overview of the different areas and initiatives on campus, with most of the time in the room available for attendees to ask questions. So we are joined today by Eden Renee Hayes, who is the director of the Davis Center. She's waving. Ali Corey, who is the Associate Director for Inclusive Learning Environments at the Davis Center. Rebecca Garcia, who's the Associate Dean of Students and Dean of Williams Firsts. And Scott Henderson, who is the Senior Project Manager for the Office of Planning and Design and Development. So we'll spend about 15 minutes today speaking to each individual, and I'm going to pass it over now to Kellen O'Brien, who will launch us into our first Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Annie. Thank you for joining. This was originally going to be when we bumped y'all into breakout rooms, but given the intimate group potentially instigated by some really, really nice weather up in the Northeast, like Annie said, we're going to keep everything here. So what we'll end up doing is staying in this room. We'll go for about 15-ish minutes. Each of our campus members will talk for just a few minutes to share a little bit more about what they do, and then we will open it up to questions, comments, thoughts, really whatever your heart desires. We'll go in the same order that Annie introduced. So I'm going to kick it over to Eden Renee to get us started.
Great, didn't know I was first. So Allie and I run the Davis Center, which is the multicultural center on campus. So many probably know it better as the Multicultural Center. But in 2012, it was renamed as the Davis Center. We help and support 23 and growing. We're really close to getting our first Indigenous MINCO group, Minority Coalition group, where, yes, definitely very, very excited about that. Been going over edits for their constitution recently, which is pretty amazing. In addition to supporting the minority coalition groups, we lead campus conversations as it relates to any topics in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We provide a lot of educational workshops around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Allie curates the Social Change film series, which is a combination with Images Cinema, where lots of different films can be shown, not necessarily documentaries, but definitely many of those. And it's a really nice opportunity to be able to collaborate with a campus partner, an off-campus partner, as well as to offer the different things that we do to those who are off campus. So anyone can come if they like make it into Williamstown. And let's see, Allie, anything else that we do? There's always so many different things. I'm just like kind of keep it all in my head at once.
No, that feels like most of it. I mean, we'll do like lunch and learns and dialogues. We bring folks to campus for that. A fair amount of work that I do also is focused specifically on like pedagogy in the classroom, but also outside. So working with the recent things I've been doing are like working with the faculty at Mystic to make their housing process more gender inclusive, because they do a lot of travel and they need to be thinking about that. Working with travel classes for winter study, trying to think about how do we build a really robust community, a robust and diverse community in just 2 or 3 weeks. Giving presentations to different departments and working with individual faculty on their course design. And then also another exciting thing is trying to work on, like just more gender inclusive, more all gender spaces on campus, including like locker room and stuff like that. So those are some more of the things that we do.
Awesome. And I think we can open it up to questions, comments, and thoughts from attendees. Go ahead, Keebler.
Hi, guys. Just a big thank you from a former Minority Coalition officer. I'm now the chief, I'm saying Chief Diversity Officer and hoping that's my next promotion, but no, I'm the VP of DEI for the America 250 Foundation. So I just wanted to say thank you guys for giving me a solid grounding in what it looks like to build community across difference. And my question for you guys is, as we work to build better communities at Williams and to build the social support networks that I found, what do you think are the top 3 challenges facing Minority Coalition communities today at Williams?
Oh gosh, unfortunately, that one's a pretty easy question. Partially because of COVID, but maybe because of other reasons as well. Basically, there has been a loss of like grounding in knowledge as it relates to like kind of passing the torch from this leadership and their knowledge of how to do everything to the next. And so just imagine that it's March 2020 and COVID hits and everybody goes home. That's around the same time they start thinking, okay, well, who's going to be the next leadership for us? So then that means they're also lacking time for that leadership overlap. So that means that when everyone comes in the fall, there isn't the historical knowledge of like, this is how things were done prior. These are the things that worked. These are the like different ways that you can work with this office or that office, what this office can get to you. That little extra thing that you need to know, like, oh, if you want a tab at Lickety, there's no point in calling or emailing. You have to physically go to Lickety. Like those things, like they need to be passed on from one to the next. So of course, like we have a lot of that knowledge, and we help groups out. We do a lot of boot camp training. So we have a fall boot camp and a spring boot camp where we talk about like, well, this is how the money works. These are the different things you need to know. This is what we have set up, and just have like robust processes in order to help everybody along, while also acknowledging just and trying to go against that effortless perfection idea and say like, hey, you're gonna forget something. So when you forget, don't worry, that's exactly what we're here for. And I think that's another thing that is also a big challenge for the Minority Coalition groups. It's a huge challenge for anybody on campus, honestly, faculty, staff, or student, is this idea of I need to do it right and I need to do it right now. Sorry for the energy balls in the background. If you can hear them, they trust me, they're louder for me than they are for you. But it's this idea that I can't show that I'm struggling. It's this idea that I can't make it seem as if I need help. And so we try to do many things to help them to realize that that's just unrealistic and that we're here for their support. And that that's just not a good way to go into the rest of the world, because you want to be able to say, like, I want to collaborate with you instead of I want to do this all by myself. So it's just something else that really helps to move things forward in a particular way. It's just acknowledging that we're all human and having grace as we help as mistakes are made. We just help you to keep going and don't fault you for it, and try to use like restorative approaches. Let's see, something else that's affecting, because you said 3, so I'm trying to like hit on 3 things.
I can jump in if you want for a second. I mean, I would say one thing that's been challenging, I think, for Minko is the specifically like coalition side of it, with groups working together and trying to organize together to make the changes that they want to see. I think part of that is due to, again, to COVID and the general fracturing of the social space here. There's just been a lot of interruption, and it's been hard to generate really solid spaces for community over the last couple of years. And I also think that part of it is a bigger issue that we're seeing, and that I've seen, previous employment at other institutions, where people can end up getting siloed according to the identities that are most important to them at any given time, and feel like they need to focus a lot of energy primarily just like on one thing. So sometimes a Minko group may end up kind of focusing primarily on difference within their group, rather than feeling like maybe being able to work together across a bunch of different groups to do something. I would say that groups have been doing a really nice job of kind of shifting course on that this year. Like I'm the advisor for QSU, and they did some really great events this past month in April, with like not even other Minko groups, with groups out of the chaplain's office. One of them was a Minko group, the MSU Muslim Students Union, but then also Williams Christian Fellowship, to try to build connections between QSU as an organization and these other more faith-based organizations. And that's the kind of thing that's like, I want to be building on those successes, seeing that kind of thing happen. I know that that's been happening more, again, as COVID stuff loosened for a little bit. It made it easier for groups to do that. But the thing that I think is a challenge is kind of grounding folks in the history of that specific coalition building stuff. So not feeling like they just have to reinvent it, but also trying to get students, and to be honest, like the staff too, to learn more about how did the coalition come into being, what does it mean to be a coalition in 2022, in organizing in social justice spaces. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, the word coalition meant something different, and it was practiced differently, and people had different expectations of what it would mean to work together, and to find common shared interest and try to achieve something together. And so, and with that in mind, like one of the things that we are hoping, we haven't gotten the official word yet from the winter study folks, but I am planning to be teaching a specific coalition class during winter study next year that's about the formation of Minko, using materials that are in the archives, and situating that within the larger context of organizing on campuses since 1960s. Because again, that landscape has changed a lot, and just trying to figure out what are the ways that we can kind of support from the side without directing groups what to do, because they have to be kind of autonomous, but trying to give that really solid grounding and platform from which each group can really work, on their own and also together.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for your question.
Eden, Renee, and Allie, we're going to end up shifting to Allie, so I'm sure that y'all will be able to sort of double team that as well. But I'm curious, one question that has come up a few times from folks who were not able to make the Zoom today, but since we're recording, I'm wondering if I'll share it here. Some folks are wondering, there was a question that came up during Claiming Williams around student group funding, and student group funding is a really interesting topic. It's definitely not simple. And I'm wondering if y'all could talk a little bit about how MNCO groups are supported fiscally, how they access resources, et cetera.
So the MNCO groups actually have their own separate budget line that we don't make decisions as to how that budget line might be used or not. We still maintain certain things like the IRS says this, so we can't do that. There's a, as with any other budget line, there are parameters and certain guidelines as to how the money is and is not supposed to be used. So we maintain that. But other than that, they make the biggest decision. And so there's a pretty nice, healthy amount of money in there. And what happens at the beginning of the year is all of the treasurers get together. They call it FundCo. And so the funding coalition, and they decide an initial allocation to each of the different minority coalition groups, but there's always a pretty healthy pot of money that's left over after that. And they submit budget requests to us, but it's really more like me and Natalie's our program coordinator, getting the beforehand knowledge about how, like, all the information that we need in order to best support. And that's also our opportunity to be able to say, here's what you need to know because you're asking for a tab at this particular restaurant or an Amazon purchase or something else, like whatever they're coming up with. I'm partial to book clubs. I love when they do book clubs with each other. It's just such a fun way to connect when they read more about like from the authors that represent their groups and get to see like, well, what's coming next for my life, which is pretty fun. Yeah. And so we usually make the purchases. They can make the purchases like using a P card, kind of depending upon what's going on. But that's just a lot of the logistics. But it basically boils down to there's a nice pot of money that they can use. There's an additional pot of money called for heritage programming, and I always emphasize to them it's heritage programming. It's not Heritage Month or Heritage Day or Heritage Week. Any day is a good day for heritage. So whatever heritage programming you have, you can potentially access that pot of money in order to fund whatever the event program initiative might be.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I'll just add really quickly that I've worked at a number of different institutions, and the funding available and also the kind of autonomy with which the students can act is it's really important to the functioning of MNCO. It's one of the things that I'm really interested in, again, over the next number of years, trying to, again, strengthen that sense of coalition because they share that money. That's one of the really concrete ways that we can think about what a coalition is. It's like about sharing material resources and using them to their best advantage. And that's really, it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of tracking. It's a lot of trying to figure out what the best ways to use the money together is. But it's also just an amazing opportunity for folks as they're here and in college to learn like how to manage budgets, how to make proposals for money. And then when we transition, I'll talk a little bit about the Dively Committee, which is the committee that is focused on LGBTQ life on campus and support and encouraging groups to be thinking about how could you apply, for instance, for money from this group? How do you think about using aspects of any particular group's kind of core mission and then collaborating or emphasizing different aspects of the membership to put on programming. And there's other pots of money around the college that they can use also in that way. So I guess I will take over now. Should I just take over now? to talk about LGBTQ life. Awesome. So as Renee said, like I'm the associate director for inclusive learning environments at the Davis Center. So a lot of my work is really centered in the Davis Center. Where all my work is, but then I also do a fair amount of work with other units and departments. And one of the major focuses that I've had over the course of this year is as the chair of the Dively Committee. The Dively Committee is a committee that's been around for, I think we're coming up to the 30th year of service essentially to the college. And Mike Dively is the founder of the funds that were endowed for this. There's a lectureship fund that we manage where where student groups and other departments of the college can essentially apply for co-funding through us to help support their programming. And so that's the lecture fund. And then we also have a summer opportunity grant program. And so those are two things that are like really concrete that we have. And I've ended up having a really wonderful time working. The LGBTQ plus community at Williams is super vibrant, super diverse, and has been really welcoming to me. As people may know, like I'm pretty new to the college, and I feel like I showed up last June, I've been able to make a lot of connections, both with staff and faculty, but then also with a lot of students who have come to the Davis Center for various reasons or have been connected to me through people that I've met, who are staff and faculty. And QSU is a MINCO group. That's the Queer Student Union. They're kind of a hub for LGBTQ plus student activities and stuff on campus. And I'm their advisor. There is a trans and non-binary group as well. That's not yet a MINCO group, but I think we'll be eligible to apply for that maybe next year based on the MINCO constitution. That's beyond the binary. And then there's also really the Dively committee is quite active. And for instance, like the Dively committee plans and executes rainbow graduation. And rainbow graduation will be happening this coming Friday. It's pretty exciting. It's going to be a relatively large event with a brunch, a bunch of swag. We're going to be getting the graduating seniors books. We put together one of the commitments that we had this year was trying to support local queer and trans owned businesses. And so what that means is for the swag, to the extent that it's possible, we're really trying to avoid using places like Amazon and focus much more on the local vendors that we have here. There's a wonderful shop, Wild Soul River, that we're partnering with to get some things. There's a new bookstore in North Adams, Bear and Bee, that's run by queer and trans folks. And we're going to be putting a special book order through them. And that was something that came out of the students on the committee who were really committed to trying to support the local community and not just kind of silo all of our influence on the campus. And so those are kind of main, I would say that like QSU Beyond the Binary and the Dively Committee are really the kind of hubs of queer and trans life on campus right now. And there've been a ton of awesome events. I'm happy to talk about some of the events that we've had or answer any questions that folks have. And I did just get a question about does the QSU throw a specific party every month? I will say, I don't always know exactly what kinds of parties the MINCO groups are throwing. So I don't know
jump in with that though, since I would be looking at the purchase request related to the parties. I wouldn't say every month for QSU.
Or every semester.
Every semester, totally. I mean, I wouldn't say like party animals, but they definitely have their fun. Over the past few years, they have had a joint kind of around Halloween time-ish party with BSU. So that's been pretty cool to help to support and coordinate. And they honestly, QSU is just so varied in the many different requests that they have. It's a lot of getting together, but not necessarily parties.
Thanks, y'all. Any questions, comments, thoughts from attendees? All right. I think we are going to move on to the next person. But if questions come up that you think about that you maybe forgot to ask or didn't think about at the time, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll be able to either go back to them or we can start a conversation there as well. Thank you, Eden Renee. Thank you, Allie. In continuing talking about the Davis Center, I think we'll end up, let's shift over to Scott Henderson, who can talk a little bit about the Davis Center building project.
Great. Thank you very much. So I do have some visuals, so I might just put those on the screen too, so I'm not just waving my arms around describing it. So, but real quick, I'll just give you an update on the project, big picture. We are wrapping up construction drawings this month, which will then go towards permit. We have the full team ready to go and been working hard. Lots of them for about 3 years now on the project. Anticipated start of construction. Oops, sorry about that. Speaking of kids. Start of construction would be early July. But there is some activity. If you're on campus, you'll probably see some activity up there, just prepping some of the buildings. But construction would start in July, and we're hoping to have everything up and running, move in January of 24. So it's about an 18-month process. A lot of that driven by current conditions in the construction market, lead times and procurement issues. But we're working with a great contractor that's trying to stay ahead of all these issues and get us going. So, so I will just share the screen just to give everyone a quick overview here. Here, share. All right. And just want to make sure everyone can see that, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, so just to orient everybody here, Walden, so Spring Street is where the arrow is here. You might recognize the post office, and Walden Street. So the college bookstore is on the corner there. Walden Street runs east-west here. This is the science building, the new South Science, or the Hopper. And this is Morley Circle. So as you can see, we are keeping the front portion of Rice House, and we are keeping Jeunesse House. Hardy House sits here currently, which is being demolished for this new addition to Rice. And Chandler House, which is the brick house towards Walden Street, is being demolished too for outdoor space as part of the programming. So one thing real quick, when we look at existing buildings and there is the potential for demolition, it's something we take very serious and work very closely with the committee. And we create what's called conditions of success. So it basically takes project goals that are developed with the committee. So we establish, say, 10 to 12 goals for the project, which can be anything from how you want the space to feel to what energy goals might be assigned to it, or sustainability goals. So they range, but they all get assigned importance, and we review each existing building and understand how that building can meet these goals in the best way. And while Chandler was sort of an easy case because it has never been used by the Davis Center, it was given as the project started as extra space, but it was extra space that shared a lot of the qualities which might be nice as terms of the residential feel, but just aren't meeting the needs of these growing student groups, where a typical living room in a house, you might only fit 10 people. So we're looking at spaces now with groups coming in that might need 30 to 40 people in the space. So Hardy was a difficult decision. At the end of the day, it did not sort of the three to work with what we were looking for to add space on this narrow site. It was the one that was sort of chosen for demolition. And it was very much a focus as the new addition, the new construction part of the project came in, that the spaces that were coming out of Hardy were well represented and improved as part of that process. Some of the resource spaces, as well as these new spaces that are being created that I'll show you on the floor plans. And just one other thing on this diagram here, a key part of this, which ties to sort of general campus initiatives tied to strategic planning that's happening now in master planning or framework study, I guess, is sort of the idea of access, universal access and accessibility. And everyone here knows Williams is a difficult place for that because of the topography. And what we're trying to do on this site here is improve or maintain current conditions. So from the north, it's probably the most accessible approach coming past the science quad. You're at the level of Morley Circle, so everything's accessible at that point. There's never been a good accessible connection towards Spring Street, which runs along Bank Street, where the arrow is. What we're doing there is actually creating an accessible route through the new addition. So you enter in the lobby, there's an elevator that brings you to a Bank Street lobby. And I'll show you that in the floor plan. And that gives you direct access out. And now for the first time, there'll be an accessible route east to Spring Street. And heading south, we've created this pathway, which it's a bit long, but it actually provides universal access down to Walden Street. So if you were to look at a cross section through the site from Rice House to Walden Street, it's probably about 14 feet difference. So we're able to work with the landscape design to accommodate that, to make it fully accessible within that cross section. The ground, so the basement plan, the lower floor plan, this shows you that Bank Street lobby. So just to orient you, this is Rice House and Morley Circle would be out in the front here. So you're able now to enter the building at this point. You come into this Bank Street lobby. The space is down at that point. It's really about this lobby as a visitor point of view. Otherwise, it's mechanical space. Student group storage would be down at this level. Again, they can use the elevator to transport. Sometimes what they're storing is fairly large dragon heads and drum sets. And we're maintaining the stair, the external stair that exists. It's being rebuilt slightly north, that exterior connection. And these dashed lines actually is a bridge above, which you see better in this plan here. So here's that external stair. Once again, Rice House here, and you can see the edge of Morley Circle. It's been talked about as 3 buildings, but it's actually 2 buildings what we're creating here. So Rice House, as I said, we're keeping the front portion. The back right now is this kind of oddball apartment that's been used for different things over the years, but that's being removed and this new addition being added. And you can see here it picks up, this is one of the Hardy spaces that was repurposed in this addition, the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center. And this is that bridge connection. So you cross over, the stair to Bank Street goes underneath it, and you're entering into this primary space of the main lobby. And one of the more important spaces is this multi-purpose room, which I'll talk about in a minute. What we learned pretty quick, this goes back now a few years when we did about 6 months of outreach and listening sessions where the design team was able to sit in spaces like the faculty house or Peresky and just listen to students come in, and they had the walls covered with floor plans and idea boards and things like that, just to understand what's important about the current buildings and what is important about this idea of new space. And what really came to light was the importance of cooking across all cultures and all groups. And that led to this really anchor piece of a kitchen design coming into the project and really serving as a support space to branch off and connect to all these other spaces. So the design teams created this really interesting space where it's 2 kitchen stations. So it's a big kitchen, but 2 groups can be cooking at the same time. So it's it's small in this plan, but there's 2 of everything in there. So it's a pretty good sized space. Just to give you an orientation, Hardy is about half the footprint of this right now, and Hardy's a pretty big house. So it gives you a sense that that kitchen itself is almost half of Hardy House. And that has direct access to this multi-purpose room. Other spaces in this floor, we're keeping the general layout of Rice, but it's getting a complete gut renovation. So we're stripping it down to its base frame and rebuilding every part of it to current energy codes and just bringing back some of the life that it's really interesting. It's actually an old barn frame, timber frame building. So it's going to be a fun process to put that back together. That multi-purpose space, Ian, Renee, and Ali talked about the number of groups, which also have a number of activities. And I don't expect everyone to read these, but these are lists of some of the activities and events that came about through that listening process. And whether or not they're a day event, night event, if it's sort of once a year, once a semester, that all that information was collected. And this space was designed to have that flexibility through movable partitions. So those folding walls that you see in some auditorium type spaces. So you could have the space broken down to basically lobby in the bottom right here, to a seminar room, to a living room, or you could have it broken off from the lobby as for maybe a lecture. You could have it completely open to the first floor for a major event like the Halloween party. Or you could have a number of things, and the AV system will support all this, where it can be workshops and different scale events that require that technology. Going upstairs, again, Rice House, we're maintaining much of the layout and just repurposing the new construction to support the needs in kind of the breakout spaces. A lot of the space that developed through the outreach with the students was a need for variety of both study space and meeting space, so different scaled rooms. So you can see the 2 shades of green. There's large meeting rooms and sort of smaller meeting study rooms. Mixed into that are the offices. In this case, in this part of the building, it would be for the Pathways group, which currently was in Hardy House. Right now they're in Swing Space on Spring Street. They'll be in this addition for their office space. And then the second floor, so the bridge itself is a 2-story space. And actually this will be, I think, a pretty interesting space because it's a laptop study bar. So you're sitting facing out towards Spring Street, but you're elevated enough, you're seeing over Spring Street beyond, and there's a really strong, this part of campus, the site itself is a really, as landscape goes, it's some of the best views I think on campus. So you're looking out towards the Hoosick Range, a little bit towards Greylock, and not to forget Jeunesse. We're repurposing Jeunesse, sorry about that. And the key part of Jeunesse is to, one, make it feel equally connected to this, because we weren't able to make a single building. It made more sense to keep some of these buildings. So a key move we're doing there is actually shifting the front door from basically the driveway side where the porch is up front here, and moving it on axis with the new court that's in front of the addition. So just to go back one step, Jeunesse would be on this side here. That entry would be right on axis here. So it really connects into this new outdoor space. And I think we'll do a lot to make that feel like a much more connected piece visually as well as physically, just a shorter walk to the entrance. And accessibility, again, a key part of this. We're adding an elevator to a building that does not have one currently. So the second floor for the first time will be handicap accessible. And that includes things like widening halls, widening doorways. So there's some work in there. It's more renovation focused, but it'll give that building it'll bring it to the level of the new building in terms of some of these key goals of the project, and remain primarily the admin focus, but there is still some meeting space that I'm sure the students will take advantage of. And then just a quick rendering. So this is from the north. So here's Rice House, Jeunesse House down here, and this new addition here. So it's tough to see the bridge, but it's right in that little slot there. You're able to walk under it to Bank Street, and the architects have proposed this new paint scheme, which actually ties back historically to the old paint color of Rice. We were able to actually peel off layers of siding and actually see that it was this darker gray. And Jeunesse will have the same. So it begins to unify this entire piece here. And then the new addition, which has taken a really interesting roof form, and that sort of evolved through a few reasons. One is these are kind of unique buildings on campus because they're hip roofs versus a lot of the gable roof structures. So they took a lot of the angles and geometry of that and started to play with that into these roofs. And people began to connect with it to this reference to the mountains, which are in the distance. So it has this sort of two-part meaning, which was pretty exciting. And it also broke from colonial type architecture, which is common in New England, and the idea of this multicultural center having this different architectural appeal, I think was well received in the committee and in the community as it's been presented. And the siding itself has been an interesting approach too. It's this charred wood siding. So it's, I think it's about a 200-year-old Japanese traditional method of preserving wood. We're actually charring the surface of it, so it doesn't require the paint or stain. It just becomes this natural material. And it evolved through actually a sustainability charrette we had with the entire project team and committee about this connection to areas of Williamstown and this connections to white oaks, which evolved into this tree reference, and the idea of this tree having this preservation between the external bark and the internal wood. And you can kind of see the referencing with the window cuts and that same idea being captured here. So again, this, we will be starting mostly with demolition in July and getting quickly into foundation work. And this is all wood frame construction. So I'm hopeful it'll go quick, but it'll be an interesting process. And I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you so much, Scott. We have time for 1 or 2 questions from folks. If anybody has questions, thoughts, comments. And I'll share this from Keebler in the chat. So there's a question for the larger group. So as students transition into the workforce, how are they being prepared to find and build community within and across difference in the workplace or digital spaces as professionals?
Can I just jump in real quick on that? Because a key part of the project we're trying to do is capture, take the mission of the Davis Center and bring it into the project. So we took that early on with architect selection to try and find architectural firms that capture a similar mission, and ended up with a great team with a very diverse group of architects and consultants. And now moving it into construction, making that almost built into the process, not only for this construction manager and their team, but as they reach out to subcontractors and they seek out WBE sub-consultants and contractors, or MBE, and then bring that to not just ownership levels of these companies, but of workforce levels, and then open it up. And there'll be a lot more information as we get into construction about this, but having workshops on site for students that might be interested in design and construction to sort of come in and understand and see a project being built, but understand who's building it and the sort of groups and companies that are tied to it.
Thanks so much. Any questions before we move on to the incredible Rebecca Garcia? I did my lovely 5-point countdown. Allie, did you want to add something in?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we should address Keebler's great question in the chat now, or if maybe we should let the final presenter go and then respond to it then. I don't want to cut Rebecca's time off.
No, thank you, and thank you, Keebler. Yeah, we can come back to that.
Awesome.
No interruptions. This is an intimate group, and we get to go into the weeds on this in ways that we wouldn't be able to otherwise. So thank you, Scott. We might come back with more questions, but we are going to pass it now to Rebecca.
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So in my role as the Dean of Williams First, I support students over their time at Williams through intentional collaborative programming with my class dean colleagues and partners across campus. I also provide individual advising. So Williams First students, for those of you that are not familiar with them, really they are students who are the first in their families to be on the path to receive a 4-year college degree. Here at Williams in particular, it also, that definition is a little bit more expansive. It also includes a lot of other first experiences. So students who are the first in their families to attend a college like Williams, students who are the first in their families to attend a US institution, and a list of other first experiences. And so I want to be clear that encompasses a number of experiences within the group. I would say, if I were to sort of just a quick summary of the work I do. So a lot of the work I do is about building inclusive spaces with partners across campus for first students in particular. And so a lot of that work is centered around belonging. And so we do a lot of that initially within Williams First in the PRIO program. And so initially when students are part of that onboarding program, they are recognized, they're appreciated, they're affirmed in that space, and they're connected with other resources on campus. So the hope is that, they're early on, they're starting these to build their relationships with campus partners across campus, and they're being acclimated to resources for that college transition. And we're also we're helping them build relationships amongst the cohort. So that's one of our signature programs from Williams First. But I think the bigger goal and the hope is that as part of the work I'll do with the board and with our team in the Dean of Students office is really to look at that work and think about their development over those 4 years and what other programs we might be intentional about building out for these students. And a bigger piece of that is thinking about what is their experience across campus, right? So I personally feel like I will do my job if students can come to me and say they feel they belong in the Science Center, right? If they feel like they can belong at the career education, right? And so ultimately is broadening that those inclusive spaces for them throughout campus. So that's really ultimately the work that I feel that I'm charged with. And so I work with the partners, like Davis Center, ODI, Pathways for Inclusive Excellence, and some of the academic departments and our own Dean of Students office to do some of that work. So we're kind of in the preliminary stages of that, but ultimately, I guess that's a little bit of a summary of the work.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any questions for Rebecca about the first experience on campus or how students maybe adapt to Williams as they come in? I think we've got the top-notch alums on the call. So thank you so much, Rebecca. I think we can open it now just to any questions. Keyboard, we can come back to yours. If you want to, if you're comfortable unmuting and just sharing aloud again.
Sure, thank you. So just as students transition into the workforce, how are they being prepared to find and build community within and across difference in the workplace or digital spaces as professionals? Okay, I thought the first question was easy.
So I can, I think what I would say about that is, you know, their collective experience over 4 years, right? And so particularly within the first community early on, we kind of set a value set of interdependence, right? And so the idea is that the college supports you and we want you to support each other. And so I think having, being intentional about that value set early on, the hope is that they're carrying that with them, as well as, you know, some of the other things that are being taught within the various sessions around growth mindset, right? So the idea is that at any given time they are learning, right? And hopefully they are also feeling like they're validated, they're appreciated, and they're recognized, and that they're able to then carry some of those experiences with them as they transition to the workforce. I don't know about folks on this, you know, on the panel, but certainly it isn't without challenges. And so I think when you're transitioning from from a higher ed institution space to, you know, your adult life, you're having to really look back and reflect on some of those lessons that mentors within the institution kind of laid out for you. So to kind of remind you as you move forward. I know, just as a side note, career education is doing we're being intentional about working with career education to think about how students are being transitioned out. So more work to come there. But I think ultimately, and just thinking about some of the work that's being done amongst campus partners, a lot of it is around building that growth mindset, that self-efficacy, so that they are able to, when they transition, right, they're able to utilize some of those coping strategies to help them be successful in that transition.
I would also add to that just about what's just being a leader within the minority coalition groups is I think that's a lot of the quote unquote soft skills that we must learn in order to be successful as a professional. So especially thinking about it in terms of treasurers and chairs and the intimate knowledge they need to have of their own ledger. Like I learned budgeting from my father, who was a CPA. I did not learn in college. So this is an opportunity for them to think about, okay, well, this is how much money is in the budget. This is how I try to reach out to somebody in order to find co-sponsorship. This is how I work along other people within my group to pull off an event, which is partially related to budget and partially related to other things. This is what I do whenever I have to carry a lot and other people are not carrying enough with group projects. So being a student leader in many different ways is gaining a lot of those quote unquote soft skills. And that's also why we hold those minority coalition boot camps in the fall and in the spring, and to be able to help them to think about all the different issues that could potentially arise and work through those. And the spring boot camp, we specifically also spent some time focusing on purposefully working alongside another group. They have to make up a mock event of their own type. So we randomly pair them with a different Minko group, and they have to figure out, like, given separate cultural traditions and heritages and what they might want to honor, how is it that they can collectively do an event together and create that, and think about what type of pitfalls they may run into and what they need to do in order to move forward with an event like that. And sometimes they actually do the event itself instead of just do the mock version of it as they work alongside each other. So a lot of being a student leader, in just from the different requirements of pulling off events and maintaining your ledger, is is developing what you need to in order to continue on to that next step as a professional.
Thanks. I'm happy to hear we can always count on Williams students to take something that was supposed to be a mock and actualize it. Overachievers, are we? If you guys are looking for support in helping students to transition to the workforce, particularly in looking at that institutional value set and how to find a job that collaborates or has a lot of support for your same values, as well as looking for things like, is there a diversity page? How many people are, how many staff members are dedicated to diversity in a company? Does the company have a Women at NASA special interest group? Because that space can be challenging for women. If you're looking for any resources around that, please think of me as a resource and a contact. I really enjoy mentoring Williams students, even though one that I was going to hire as an intern this summer got away. She got a fellowship instead, so I can't be angry. But if you guys need a resource in that sort of transition space, please do let me know. I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, I would just add one quick thing on that topic too. Thank you so much for that, Keeler. I think in my work directly with students, like I tend to try to take a really holistic view where I both account for like professional aspirations, what the workplace is like, but also, I mean, I come from a community organizing and labor organizing background, and thinking also about what kinds of connections and ways of building community happen outside of the workplace, and then how can that lead to either other opportunities or just a more fulfilling life? Because I think sometimes I try to like temper some of the emphasis on what are you going to do when you graduate, that kind of thing, with like, okay, you're actually going to be fine, like really. And some of the ways that happens, I would say, is through a lot of like longer term one-on-one mentoring and advising of students around how to navigate conflicts. And some of that is like, I can't resolve your conflict for you, but I'm really excited about trying to help you figure out a way to navigate, structure conversation, come in and support, maybe mediate a little. But routinely students find themselves in conflicts over, decisions or work collaborations and partnerships with other folks on their board or another group. And trying to model like what that can look like, both in a professional way, absolutely, but also in a way that's like, we're part of a community, and it's a working relationship, but it's also a human personal relationship. How do we allow for ourselves to show up in as our full selves, and be able to assert maybe some boundaries or needs in a particular space, where sometimes students feel like they really don't have that opportunity. For me, that has ended up in my own professional life being really helpful at work, but also like way outside of work. And sometimes I find that trying to encourage people to think about that more expansive way has also landed like quite well in building good relationships that are kind of focused on trust and growth.
I have a question, if I can ask it. Having been on the EC, can you all hear me? Yes. Having been on the EC for the past 2 years, having just been up at Williams and being privileged to be on this strategic planning committee where we read so many of these surveys that went out to alums, which really demonstrated the same issues that current students are also dealing with. One of the issues that repeatedly came up and comes up is mental health, and particularly for students who are in a number of the MINCO groups that are being discussed here today. And I'd like to know what each of you as leaders in the various groups are doing to help address the mental health. And what came across is that there is insufficient culturally competent professional staff to address the many issues. I'd like to know what each of you is doing as leaders to help make that happen for the current students?
So I am a social psychologist. That's what my PhD is in. And one of the areas that I do extra research in is in positive psychology. Social psychologist is not necessarily related to things having to do with the more clinical side of psychology. I used to always say, well, I don't have a couch in my office, but now I do. But not being trained as a clinician, I did find a lot of just an extra passion within positive psychology, specifically because it focuses on, okay, well, we know that there's a lot that's going on that isn't working out so well in clinicians and like other types of psychology, specifically focus on, well, okay, what's going wrong and how do we pay attention to that? Positive psychology doesn't ignore what's going on, but instead says, well, how can we bolster the things that are going right? So I just got very much into self-care. Whenever I have a meeting with a student, one-on-one or in a group, I always spend a little time saying, okay, what are you doing for self-care? How's that going for you? How can I help you in another way to perhaps like organize and prioritize your scheduling? We also, because of the Davis Center initiative for the new building, is as Scott so wonderfully presented on, we have moved into another building where we are and it's our temporary holding tank until we have the new construction up. And two of the different rooms that we have within that 11,400 square foot space, thank you, Scott, are for 4 staff, are focused on mental health. So one is a spirituality meditation room, and the other room is something that I'm building called I decided to call it a time in room. So it's specifically focused on like emotional decompression. So it's a space to have like soft seating, like beanbag type of chairs, a basket of adult coloring books, a basket of fidgets, a sun lamp, just lots of plants, different things where if someone's just like really up in themselves and just can't like decompress, this is a place physically that they can go to and know that they can find methods of emotional decompression. We do partner with IWS, Integrative Wellbeing Services, on different initiatives when we can. We know that they're very stretched, but we try to find different ways to just to integrate with them. So there are sessions during the first day's time, and myself and one of their therapists led one of the sessions together to help people to think about what's going on with their self-care before they start their first year at Williams. So those are a few of the things that we have going on within the DC specifically. But yes, we also advocate for more culturally competent care for all of our health professionals, including our therapists.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up and think like a lot of my reflecting on that question, a lot of my work is, on the one hand, it's working with students and doing stuff like what Ian Renee is talking about checking in with them, asking them, encouraging them, for instance, to consider maybe saying no to that next thing that they think that they need to do in order to build their resume or to be competitive for the next step, or just because they think they have to do it. Encouraging them to really think about what their needs and boundaries are, especially around leadership positions in MNCO. That ends up being an emphasis on my kind of one-on-one mentorship and advising that I do. And I would say other thing that I know that I focus on, I would say everyone at the DC and within OIDEI more broadly is focusing on is like actual structural changes to the way that the college works, because more therapists is important. But if the environment that people are in remains really challenging, and for some students it may feel hostile, a therapist isn't going to fix that in the same way that making some of the changes that we want and need to see to make life less stressful for students on a day-to-day basis. And so, as an example for that, like a lot of those changes are behind the scenes. They may seem little to some people, but like one of the things, students are getting tested for COVID. Everybody's getting tested for COVID at least weekly now. And for the whole time that I was here, the vials had sex gender markers on them. And it is there's good concrete research and also anecdata from my whole trans community that it is really frustrating to be misgendered every single time that you go to a medical professional. And that contributes to worse mental health. And so working together with Eden Renee and the Trans Inclusion Committee and the folks that do our testing to remove that marker from the vial so that trans students aren't constantly being misgendered on a medical, in one medical interaction that they have to have every week. So we also are trying to think about that, like, and then my work with, I would say also with faculty, a lot of
Allie, you didn't say the big part of it.
the big part that it's for everywhere that this place does it, not just Williams. Yes, so this was the Broad Institute who does testing for like a ton of different institutions, and the way that this change ended up happening was it wasn't just for Williams because it required a third-party vendor. It's a whole process, but the good news is that means that any institution or an educational institution that uses the Broad Institute testing no longer has those sex gender markers on them, which means that it's not just Williams that's being benefited and trans and non-binary students at Williams who are being benefited because the data that they had was bad. It's everybody who gets that testing. And that's what we were told. I haven't confirmed that with other institutions yet, but I did confirm it for ours, and I have every reason to believe them. And so that was super exciting as a way for Williams in part to also just be a leader on this. And be like, for me, that's one of the really core aspects of my job here, where Williams has a lot of resources to the extent that it's possible for us to do things that actually materially change things elsewhere. Like that's one of the markers that I see for actually improving equity. Because if it's only improving equity for students at Williams, I love the students at Williams. I want them to have the best, but I've also worked at UMass Boston, and I want those students also to have the best, and they don't get the resources that we do at Williams. And so that's the kind of thing, like advocating for better all gender bathroom spaces, working together with the Office for Accessible Education to improve access points and build a team of staff across the college who can support an accommodations process for students who have accessibility needs that aren't entirely filtered through medical professionals and psychiatric and like psychological professionals to whom access is very class-based. So instead, if they have a relationship with one of us, they can come to us, and that's an in to get accommodations. It's stuff that's like that I would also say, trying to improve the ease with which a student can get a reduced course load so that the student has more time and space to take care of themselves. Those are also things, kind of structural opportunities and targets really for us at the Davis Center, like me and Renee are working on this, but there's a lot of people across the college who are doing this too. And that's one of the things that's exciting about working here.
Thank you so much, Ian, Renee, and Allie. I try not to put people on the spot. Rebecca, I'm wondering if there's anything that you want to add there from the Dean's Office perspective before Annie wraps us up.
Yeah, so I would say very much about, looking at our academic policies to figure out where we're not in alignment around well-being. And so an example, students, here at Williams need to take 4 courses per semester. So if they have extenuating circumstances, right, if they need that flexibility, the only way that they can actually take a reduced course load is actually go through OAE and have some documentation around that, and which can be challenging because sometimes they're not connected to IWS, or they're not connected to a health provider, and it is an extenuating circumstance. Something came up. So I think just some flexibility in our academic policies that continues to kind of sends the message that we value well-being. So a lot of the students that in the class, when students come to our office, we talk a lot about having them reflect on the messages that they're getting in their academic environment, right, in the Williams environment, and pushing back on that, right, because it's not okay when we have a student who says, I haven't slept in several hours and I haven't eaten, but I'm committed to excellence, academic excellence, and this is what I must do. And so, we will challenge them. We'll say, how is that, where are you getting that from, right? Like does that really align with well-being, right? And so a lot of it is around this individual change, but also, as Ali mentioned, the structural changes, certainly, and particularly around these academic policies that don't align with well-being on this campus.
Thanks so much for that, Rebecca. And I feel like this is a really uplifting place to close out the session. Thank you so much for everyone joining us this afternoon. And a special thank you to Eden, Renee, Ali, Rebecca, and Scott for sharing their time and their energy with us. It's just so wonderful to hear how the college is evolving, both physically with the new building projects and renovations, but also just on the program end and figuring out how to make Williams a more sustainable and inclusive, belonging space. So just before we end here, I want to remind everyone about the final event this evening, which is the alumni keynote address with Anita Earls, class of 81. The session is entitled Operationalizing Diversity in the Professional Setting, Reflections on the Significance of the First African-American Woman's Confirmation to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Zoom link for this keynote address is in the emails that you should have received. And so we hope everyone enjoys their break, and hopefully we'll see you again in a little bit. And again, a huge thank you to all here.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you all. Great questions.